What kind of man forces the US government to build a prison unit just for him? Not a terrorist, not a war criminal, but a man they simply couldn't control. A man so dangerous, so unpredictable that locking him up wasn't enough. They had to erase him from society while he was still alive. His name was Thomas Silverstein, and for 36 straight years, he didn't touch another human being. Born in 1952 in Long Beach, California, Silverstein grew up in a broken environment. His mother married multiple times. His real father? A mystery. And the stepfathers he had were often abusive. By his teenage years, Silverstein was already slipping into the underworld. Drugs, gangs, violence. At just 19 years old, he was convicted of armed robbery and sent to Leavenworth Prison. For most people, prison is a punishment. For Silverstein, it was an education. He didn't just do time. He built connections, met the worst of the worst, and began carving out a reputation. After a brief release, he was arrested again in 1977, this time with his father, Thomas Conway, and his cousin. 3 armed robberies netted them about $50,000. But what came next would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. He was handed a 15-year sentence. But prison didn't tame him. It made him worse. Inside Leavenworth, Silverstein aligned himself with the Aryan Brotherhood, one of the most feared prison gangs in America. Their enemies? The DC Blacks, a rival gang made up of African-American inmates. Tensions exploded in 1980 when Silverstein was accused of murdering fellow inmate Danny Atwell. The evidence was shaky, and the conviction didn't stick. A year later, the prison transferred a DC Blacks member, Robert Chappelle, into Silverstein's unit. Some say it was negligence. Others believe it was deliberate provocation. Whatever the case, Chappelle was found dead, strangled. And though Silverstein denied involvement, few doubted who did it. Then came the killing that cemented his infamy. On November 22, 1981, Raymond Cadillac Smith, the national leader of the DC Blacks, was moved into the same unit. Prison guards knew there was bad blood. They did it anyway. Silverstein and fellow Aryan member Clayton Fountain didn't wait long. In one of the most brutal prison killings in history, Smith was stabbed 67 times. But Silverstein didn't stop there. He dragged the lifeless body up and down the tier, parading it like a trophy, a warning to anyone who dared cross him. The message was clear. No one was safe, not even the most feared gang leaders, not even behind bars. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Less than 2 years later, on October 22, 1983, Silverstein did something even more unthinkable. He murdered a federal correctional officer inside Marion Penitentiary. His name was Merle Klutz. Klutz had been assigned to manage Silverstein. But their relationship was toxic. According to Silverstein, Klutz was humiliating him daily, mocking, harassing, tightening control. Silverstein warned the administration. They ignored it. So he took matters into his own hands. In a matter of seconds, Klutz was ambushed, stabbed 40 times. Silverstein didn't flee. He stood there, waiting, cold, expressionless. That moment sent shockwaves through the entire federal prison system. No inmate had ever pulled off something like this inside a high-security facility. The Bureau of Prisons went into full lockdown. The murder of Officer Merle Klutz on October 22, 1983, marked a pivotal moment in the U.S. prison system. Silverstein, with assistance from fellow inmate Randy Gomez, managed to unlock his handcuffs using a smuggled key and obtained a homemade knife. He then attacked Klutz, stabbing him multiple times. Silverstein later claimed that he murdered Klutz in retaliation for deliberate harassment, including the destruction of his personal artwork and photographs during cell searches. This incident, along with the subsequent murder of another correctional officer, Robert Hoffman, by inmate Clayton Fountain just hours later, led to an indefinite lockdown at USP Marion. The prison remained under this status for 23 years, effectively operating as the nation's first Supermax facility. These events also prompted the Federal Bureau of Prisons to develop the No Human Contact Policy, a form of extreme solitary confinement designed to manage inmates deemed exceptionally dangerous. Silverstein was subjected to this policy, spending the next 36 years in isolation. His cell was specially designed to minimize human interaction, featuring solid steel doors, constant lighting, and meals delivered through a slot. He was allowed out only for brief, supervised periods in an empty exercise cage. Silverstein's treatment sparked debates about the ethics of prolonged solitary confinement, with some experts likening it to torture. The legacy of Silverstein's actions and the prison system's response continue to influence discussions on prison reform and the use of solitary confinement in the United States. And for Silverstein, life as he knew it ceased to exist. The government created a new classification just for him: no human contact. He was moved to a specially constructed isolation cell. No windows, no bars, just a solid steel door and concrete walls. His meals were delivered through a slot. Lights were on 24/7. He was allowed out only for short, supervised showers or exercise in an empty cage. No phone calls, no physical contact, not even with his guards. This wasn't solitary confinement. It was erasure. For 36 years, Silverstein lived like a ghost. And while his body was caged, his mind remained sharp. He wrote essays, letters, even filed lawsuits claiming that his treatment was cruel and unusual punishment. Some psychologists agreed. One even called it long-term sensory deprivation, bordering on torture. But the government never budged. Over the decades, prison systems evolved, but Silverstein remained the same, locked away, largely forgotten, yet still feared. His name was used to justify new Supermax designs like Florence ADX in Colorado, the most secure prison in the United States. Eventually, he was transferred there, not for rehabilitation, but to make sure he'd never again be a threat. In 2019, after decades in near-total isolation, Thomas Silverstein died from complications following heart surgery at the age of 67. The announcement came quietly. No media frenzy, no final interviews, no family tributes. For a man whose name had once sparked policy changes in the highest levels of U.S. corrections, his passing was met with silence. Silverstein had spent 36 consecutive years in solitary confinement, longer than any other prisoner in U.S. federal history. Over time, he became the face of a controversial debate. How far should a system go to punish someone it cannot control? To his critics, he was a symbol of irredeemable violence, someone who brought chaos and death into the prison system and paid the price. But to others, including psychologists and prison reform advocates, he became a case study in state-imposed isolation and its long-term psychological impact. Throughout his years in extreme confinement, Silverstein maintained his innocence in the earliest murder and expressed deep frustration over the conditions of his detention. He described his environment as one of sensory starvation, a cell without touch, conversation, or light variation. He wrote extensively about his treatment, and his writings were used in court arguments that challenged the constitutionality of extended solitary confinement. Despite the inhuman conditions, he retained some cognitive sharpness until the end. He taught himself art, penned essays, and maintained correspondence with supporters and researchers interested in the ethics of his case. Yet, none of that changed his reality. When his heart finally gave out in a Colorado hospital bed, the Bureau of Prisons marked it as just another death in custody. His story continues to divide opinion. Was he the most dangerous inmate in U.S. history? Or a man dehumanized until he became unrecognizable? One thing is certain: his life and death forced America to confront the darkest corners of its prison system. Some say he got what he deserved. Others argue he became something worse than a criminal. He became an experiment, a test of how far a prison system could go to control a man. But even now, the debate rages on. Was Thomas Silverstein a monster born from violence, or a monster created by the very system that claimed to punish him? And if the government can bury someone like this, so completely, so quietly, who else might be disappearing behind those walls?